Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, and welcome to Work Trends with Megan M. Biro. Whether you're here to network, learn, or share, we want you to have fun. During this live broadcast and Twitter chat, we'll discuss the future of work with smart and entertaining guests who value today's business and its impact on the world of work for the future. Stay tuned, because we start in 3, 2, 1.
Well, hello, everyone. Once again, this is Cindy Travella, Events Manager at Talent Culture. We were having a little bit of a snafu with Blog Talk Radio, and Megan wasn't able to log into our switchboard. A little crazy, technology, you never know. So anyways, I was able to log in, and she has asked me to step in for her today. I hope it's okay with all of you. We're doing this on a matter of 10 minutes. So I'm going to do my very best to have a great show with all of you. We have a wonderful guest with a fantastic topic lined up for you today, so I know you're going to love it. So let's get started. So again, thank you and welcome to another informative Talent Culture Work Trends live podcast and Twitter chat. So first off, we, of course, have to thank all of our friends, our sponsors, our Talent Culture community members. You all are the best. We love you, and we want to give you very big special thanks. So today, we're going to address a topic on the unconscious bias that undercuts the culture and success of companies of all sizes, and that includes startups all the way up to Fortune 500s. And according to our guest today, author and coach Gail Tolstoi-Miller, and you can follow Gail at Gail, GailTolstoi-Mill. According to Gail, companies must build awareness of the bias that takes place in the hiring process and take action. And today she's going to talk with us and share some ideas of why organizations should implement formal training for people who are in decision-making functions and how they can combat and diminish bias throughout the hiring process. So I'm going to go ahead now and introduce our guest, Gail Tolstoi-Miller. Gail is a self-professed introvert, though I've talked with her many times, and I would have to say not really, in my opinion. But anyway, Gail is a self-professed introvert who has won the war on reticence to become an award-winning CEO of Consult Networks, WORX, a staffing firm, and Speed Networks, a speed networking company. Ooh, that's interesting. Her authentic speaking and business coaching style have helped thousands of Americans get back to work. And Gail's insights on networking and the job market have been featured in outlets like MSN, and Fox Business. And her first book, Networking Karma, was released just last month on February 9th. So without further ado, welcome, Gail. We're so glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm so excited to discuss this topic, which I'm completely passionate about. So very excited to be here.
Well, we're very excited to have you. And we are all very aware of this topic. This is something that's been pervasive in business for many, many years. And it's something that, even though we're aware of it, it's difficult for people to really understand it when it's conscious or unconscious, bias. So let's go ahead and start talking about that. So, you mentioned that you were passionate about this topic. How did you become passionate about this? What kind of spurred you on?
Well, I have over 20 years of recruiting experience, and I've been on both the corporate side and the staffing side. And with all my experience, what I witnessed was that a lot of great candidates were not hired because of recruiter or hiring manager bias. And it wasn't always the best candidate that would win. And it was very frustrating for me. And so that's why from those experiences over the years, I've become very passionate, because I do believe that, candidates that should be in a position should, get the job rather than someone getting the position because of someone's bias. And I don't really think it's a fair practice, but it's not usually done in a way that's intentional, like discrimination. Unconscious bias that's why they call it unconscious, because you're not doing it consciously. It's basically what happens is your belief system, your values, things that have happened to you in the past. It's basically perception is reality. So, for instance, I'll give you an example of what a bias would look like, and it's very simple. Let's say you interview someone, and they go on the internet, and they see that you have a passion for, let's say, soccer. So on the interview, they discuss that. Automatically, you feel that connection with that person. And then in your mind, because it feels safe to you, everyone wants to feel safe, and they want to hire people that are like them because it feels safer to do so. So in their mind, they're going to think, oh, this person, we have a lot of similarities. I feel comfortable with them. So what you're going to do is think in your mind, how am I going to make this work? How am I going to hire this person? And you're going to build up their skill set in your mind. It's not conscious, though. And that's what hiring managers and recruiters do. It happens all the time. So that's an example of it. I one time had a client. She had an aversion to white pumps. The candidate was absolutely perfect, and she didn't hire because she wore, white pumps. So it's like stereotypes. I know, it's crazy. In the workplace, I believe 15% of men are 6 feet tall, but I think it's like 60% of CEOs are over 6 feet. So why is that? It's because of our bias. So everyone does it. If you ask someone and they say they've never done it, they're lying to you. Because it's not blatant, and that's the danger of it. That's the dangerous part of it.
Right. People are doing it. They're not even aware that their bias is coming into play. I'm over here giggling because I can't believe that somebody actually told you she would not hire someone because this woman wore white pumps and she has an aversion to white pumps. Wow, the crazy things that people think and say, right? Wow, that's just amazing.
And it starts even with the resume. That's the first. Like, for example, a person's name, they've done studies where you have 2 resumes that are exactly the same, and on the name is like John Doe, and then the other name is ethnic, and the person that was named John Doe got way more calls than the other resume. So even address, where you live. If someone thinks that you live in a place that they don't want to hire from, they're not going to call you. Even clubs, like you got to be really careful about your resume of like what you put on there as far as something that's going to identify your, ethnic background, religious. It's unfortunate because you want to share that because you want to show that you're active, but with certain people and their bias, they may overlook your resume. I'm not saying it's right. Obviously, it's not right, but that's what happens.
Yeah. Well, I have a train of thought about resumes. It's very important real estate, and rather than putting in any type of affiliations or associations, people should really be using that very precious real estate to talk about their work experience and their accomplishments. But I guess that's my bias, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk. There you go. So let's talk about formal training. So is there a formal training that we can recommend to hiring managers and recruiters that would help them to combat this bias, or at least become more aware of it in themselves and not let it come into play as they're making decisions about job candidates?
Yes. I think the first step is awareness. So I think a good approach is first to have your employees take a survey. That's an option, and then look at those answers, and then work with the management team and kind of brainstorm and really be introspective and honest with yourself and really question, what's going on here? What are my thoughts about this person? What have I done in the past? I mean, it even happens internally within your organization regarding promotion, your bias. Someone that you feel more comfortable with may get the promotion, but the other person is more qualified. Or even someone within the organization has flexible work schedule, even though that is designed to get more buy-in from employees and it's supposed to be positive, it could also work against you, because then people's biases, they think that, you're lazy, or you don't take your job as seriously because maybe you're working part-time or you're working from home. So the person that's maybe more present will get the promotion over the other person. Mm-hmm. So there's internal biases as well. So you really do have to, look at your staff and be honest and have an open discussion about it, and then create a process in the hiring process, obviously. So try to make it more formalized as far as questions. It shouldn't just be loosey-goosey. It's like, okay, I'm going to ask this question one day to one candidate for a position, and the next day I'm going to ask different questions. Everything should be standardized from the recruiter to the hiring managers. And then if something doesn't seem right, so if a candidate, let's say, has all the experience, but that hiring manager says, I really, this person doesn't have all the experience, but you feel they do, have the open conversation to figure out why that is. So it's almost like a checks and balances. And that's really important to do.
Yeah, I agree. Having standardized programs certainly helps to take some of the guesswork out of it. And, let's face it, many people will just boil it down to this one statement. That person was not a good cultural fit. They don't necessarily know how to articulate why. They don't necessarily understand why not, but they'll just say this person was not a cultural fit. What do you think about that, Gail? Do you think that's an overly used? Yeah, me too.
Absolutely. It's disguise. To me, that's a disguise for something else. Unless, first of all, what does that mean, cultural fit? You're getting yourself in trouble just by saying that. Maybe they don't fit the corporate culture, because cultural, when you word it that way, that gets me a little nervous. You have to be able to articulate it. If you can't articulate it, then there's a problem. You have to have the reasons as to why. And if you can't, then there's probably some underlying reason besides what they think it is.
Yeah.
You can't just go by your gut. There has to be reasons for it, and there has to be checks and balances. And it's got to start from the top. It can't just be HR managing it. It's got to be throughout the entire organization. It's got to trickle down from the top.
Right. It's a mindset in that company. I agree. So as far as training and getting everything, with checks and balances, as you say, does it matter about the size of the company? Is this something that companies of any and all sizes can implement?
Absolutely. It should be implemented in every single organization, especially a small one, because you want to get it right as you grow. So you might as well start when you're growing. Why wait when your company is larger, where it's more difficult to change?
That's a good point. Yep. So tell us about some of the worst effects of bias during the interviews, the kind that just, transcend throughout the organizational culture.
Well, what happens is it fosters alienation, because what happens is, I'll give you an example. I think that's the best way, because a lot of people don't understand what unconscious bias is. There's so many different examples, and that's another way to do the training, is to point out and ask people, what do you think of this? And really bring more awareness. But as far as the implications to an organization, it does foster alienation amongst employees, because you could group certain people. So, for instance, let's say you have a group of employees, let's just say an Asian population, and you think that all Asians are good at math. It's a stereotype, okay? So we're building into stereotypes here, and that's a big part of the bias. And they're technical. So already in your mind, you're going to think that everyone that works for your organization that's Asian fits that mold. So that's where they're going to stay. And they're not going to be able to move out of that. So you're kind of perpetuating that type of stereotype, and you're alienating those groups of people.
Well, certainly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. They're being restricted as to movement about the company. Also, I'm thinking about, even in a different realm, Gail, employee referrals. Everybody refers people that they like and, that they know and that they feel confident in recommending to their employer. So when those people are rejected for reasons unknown, or because they weren't I'm using finger quotes, the cultural fit, certainly that has got to have a deleterious effect on the employees, and not to mention do nothing good for the employee referral program.
Exactly. It trickles down in so many different areas, ranging from as I said before, promotion, salary increases, being part of certain projects. It's unfortunate that it happens, but it's reality, because basically a person's perception, their perception is their reality, that old quote. So, and that's what you perpetuate within your organization or within your department with what your actions are. So you have to be very aware that you're doing it, and you need to change it. So the more process that you put in place and the more checks and balances that you have within the organization, the less it's going to happen.
I agree. So we talked about it from the perspective of the organization, the company, the hiring organization. What can job seekers do to play a role in trying to combat this issue? Can they combat the issue? Do they have the power to do so?
Actually, my feeling is play the game. Use it to your advantage. So if you know people are doing that, recruiters are doing that, then go with it. So turn it into a positive. Recruiters are Googling you, okay? They're Googling candidates. Why don't the candidates Google the hiring managers and Google the recruiters? Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to say, oh, that's horrible to do and you shouldn't do it, but they're doing it to you. And I think it's good to do, because then you gain more information, and then what you do is, once you gain that information, try to kind of work it in the interview. So let's say someone loves the Giants, the Giants, the football team. Maybe, during the interview, sometimes the interview gets very relaxed, and they may ask you a question, and then you say, oh, I love the Giants, knowing that they love the Giants. I'm not saying that you should lie, but if it's the truth, say it if you could work it in somehow, and then that person's probably going to lay up and say, oh, my gosh, I like the Giants too, and then you talk about it for 5 or 10 minutes, and then they fall in love with you, knowing that they have this unconscious bias. So if you can work with it to your advantage, I would say that candidates should do that. But also, they have to be mindful of their resumes. That's really important. Going back to that and what information you put on there, I would definitely play it safe and not put any information that could be, I hate to say it, held against you in the biased respect.
Yeah. No, it's I think it's playing it safe by doing it that way. And and you struck on something that is very important too. You're right. Recruiters and hiring managers are out there. They're Googling people. They're on LinkedIn, of course. They're using social media and other types of platforms to find information about people. And yes, job seekers need to do that very, very same thing. One, they should know more about the people who they're going to be talking to at that organization. And you're right, trying to find a commonality or a common thread between themselves and the person that they're interviewing with. Sometimes that can make all the difference, that personal connection. So that you hit upon a very good point there, Gail. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, if you can't beat it, you might as well join. You might as well just use it to your advantage and figure out ways to do that, because you can't control what hiring managers and recruiters are going to think of you. I mean, you could do your best, obviously. You're going to put your best foot forward, but if you know that this is occurring, then you have to think of ways to use it to your benefit. Why not? That's what I would do if I was a candidate.
Right.
And I tell the candidates to do that as well. I mean, that's...
There you go. Yeah, there you go. I had a feeling that you were doing that. So I know that you're also a coach. So tell us more about what you like to focus on when building recruiting teams. What do you like to tell them? What do you advise or provide them as tips?
Well, it's definitely vast. Definitely build a process where it alleviates, the bias that happens within organizations, which I discussed before. Have set questions, have checks and balances, have assessments, testing if possible, personality tests. I like the caliper. I've used that. And try to take away any of the guesswork. So if someone, again, gives you any kind of statement and they can't back it up, people in the organization definitely needs to challenge. So you need to build that in your process. Also, know the values of the organization. That's very important. And make sure that you hire the candidates that fit within those values. Because a lot of times we just hire on skill, which obviously you want to, but also the candidate has to fit into the value system. So if that doesn't match up, that candidate is not going to work. So, for instance, if part of your values is strong customer service and a candidate doesn't really care about that, even if the person is a perfect fit from a skill set perspective, they're not going to fit within your organization long term because they don't care about customer service. There's a conflict there. So that's very important to follow that. Also, I train recruiters on how to recruit as well. A lot of the corporate recruiters, they're not, I don't believe, are aggressive enough in their recruiting tactics. So I help them navigate that process. And then also assessment as well.
That's interesting. Now, what do you mean by not aggressive enough? And tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So a lot of recruiters, they just wait for the resumes to come in from the job boards.
Okay.
Okay? And they don't think creatively, thinking outside the, I hate using thinking outside the box, but using other avenues as far as finding candidates. So they're just, I kind of call it more administrative rather than a true recruiter. So It's doing the networking, it's doing Google searches, it's going where these people hang out on LinkedIn. It's, doing other measures to get the best talent. Because sometimes the best talent, you could post a job on Monster and you get 100 resumes or 300 resumes, but no one is a fit. And then you tell the hiring manager, oh, I'm sorry, I can't fill this job. Well, in that time, you should really be networking with employees within the organization, and obviously utilizing the referral system, but going beyond that and doing other things and being proactive in finding the candidate.
Right. Yeah. I think most good recruiters are aware of that. They understand the value of pipelining, being proactive, always networking, always trying to, find groups where there are people that, could potentially be candidates for them. So, yeah, but maybe the more inexperienced recruiter, may not have that knowledge. So, good that, they have someone such as yourself to provide them some direction. So
thank you.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about you.
Okay.
Let's talk about your book, Networking Karma, and tell us about what you address in that book, and give us some specific examples if you can.
Okay. So it took me 4 years to write Networking Karma, and as you mentioned earlier, I am an introvert. Always have been. And obviously when you're an introvert, you never feel comfortable with networking. I always dreaded it, felt very uncomfortable doing it. And then one day I went to a speed networking event and felt completely comfortable. It was my aha moment, and I opened up my own speed networking firm to help my business, to network, and to help find candidates as well. So it was a win-win. So the book basically describes building relationships based on giving. And what I found was, through my 20 years of experience, the candidates that did the best were the ones that gave and networked. They were always networked. They were on a constant mission of networking, and they weren't waiting for something to happen, like lose a job or not getting a promotion to network. So I call it like the 3 S's: the sleeper, the selfish, and then the spherical networker. So in the book, there's tips about storytelling, self-branding, and other things as well. So it's not just me. I wrote the book, but there's experts in those particular areas that share information regarding that subject matter. And then also what I thought was really important about the book was, we all know what we need to do to improve, but why don't we do it? So in the beginning of the book, I talk about self-limiting beliefs and getting over that, because you have to work on yourself first in order to move forward.
True. Wonderful. So do you also address our own personal biases in your book? Do you talk about that?
Yes, actually I do. I'll give you 2 really quick examples. At my speed networking events, the name tag, I do not allow job titles or company names, because I believe everyone is equal. And when you put that person that has, I'm CEO of ABC, everyone is drawn to that person because they're thinking, what's in it for me? And I hate that, because that's not true networking. So I put that in my book as a tip, if you were to ever do a networking event, not to have anyone's, title, because a janitor is just as important as a CEO. That's how I feel. Sure. And then another example, my husband used to have a restaurant, and, that's crazy hours. I never saw him. So Saturday nights I would waitress, and there was this gentleman that really did not treat me well at all. And I went back into the kitchen, and I told my husband, and he looks out, and he said, I know that. He's here all the time. He's the nicest guy. I said, he's not so nice. So my husband comes out, introduces me as his wife, and the gentleman said to me, I am so sorry. If I knew that you were married to Bruce, I would have never treated you that way. I just thought you were a waitress.
Oh, my
and I
gosh.
actually, yes.
Oh,
and I actually said,
Gail.
yeah, his bias. Meanwhile, I'm running
Gail?
a company. I'm CEO of a company, so.
Gail, thank you. I don't mean to cut you off, but I do want to thank you, and I want to thank all of our listeners and our participants. We're jumping over to Twitter now, okay?
Awesome. I'm excited. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Gail. Bye-bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye.